Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. To be honest, earlier in the week, I was a little concerned that I wouldn't be able to join you. On Saturday, I received the dreaded call, Ms. Collins, your son's teacher has tested positive for COVID. And by the way, we're gonna need you to be tested. We're gonna need your entire family to be tested before you can come back to school. Be prepared to quarantine and just be prepared for what we don't know. As I hung up the phone, the questions started coming to mind. Where do I get tested? How much is it gonna cost? Is it gonna hurt? And what in the world? I've got too much to do. I can't sit at home and be quarantined for 2 weeks. What am I gonna do? And in that incident, I realized that this pandemic affects everyone. No one is exempt. Not my 3-year-old, not myself in the diagnostics world. It touches everyone in some way, shape, or fashion. And so as I was preparing to talk to you all today, I came to mind that my corporation is no different than yours. Yes, it's very small. I have 2 employees. They're 3 and they're 5. But my priorities, just like yours in big business, is how do I operate efficiently, normally, and safely? And that is what I want to talk to you about today. As Nathan said, my name is Heather Collins, and I proudly serve as the Abbott Ambassador for the Carolinas. I'm born and raised here, and so I have seen what the pandemic can do to businesses and way of life in general, especially when it comes to mind with industry-minded, that how do we get back to work? How can we get back to work? And that is the goal of everyone, is how can we get back to normal? Henry McMaster, of course, is saying we need to reopen. We all know this. Reopening, working is the cornerstone of financial stability in South Carolina and businesses. But we're met with other headlines like businesses are set to decide their own fate and how do they handle operations during the COVID spike. Well, that would be great if everyone in South Carolina, businesses and throughout, were healthcare businesses. But when left to their own devices, it very quickly leads to other headlines, such as, it's time for a shutdown. We must slow the pandemic. So what in the world are we to do? And what we're finding is the root of the struggle is we can't fight what we can't see. Right now, so often we are fighting an invisible enemy. We don't know where the infection is lying. And unfortunately, the math is just telling us that more people are infected than we thought. For the purpose of this webinar, I'm going to discuss 3 different types of testing that is available to you and to everyone today. The first of which is the PCR testing. This is the rapid swab testing, something that you will find very typically through the drive-through. The results are positive and negative at that moment in time. And typically those results would be positive or negative if the individual has been exposed between 2 to 6 days post the exposure to the virus. This test is very effective as far as providing a result at that moment of time, but it does have its limitations based on the fact of it does not give you a complete picture of what all is going on. The third type of testing that I'm going to discuss is the IgM serology test. IgM is the detection of the late acute infection. The individuals are still contagious, and this test comes positive further down the virus's lifespan, typically 5 to 12 days post-exposure. IgG is another serology test or blood test that we use to identify the life cycle of the virus. This test is also indicative of recovery. IgG positive comes approximately 10 to 16 days post-exposure to the virus. And as we've talked a little bit about this, I want to show you a very nice illustration. Everyone's immune response is different. So the virus will take on a lifespan differently with each individual's. But in general, and to show how the waves of response comes into play, this is a nice representation. The incubation period, if you would like to think about it, is the time from the moment where the individual or person is infected to the time that they have become symptomatic. This would be the time where the virus is cooking, so to speak, followed by the viral RNA response or a positive PCR test. That window for the PCR testing is going to detect the infectious rate immediately following the incubation period. The next wave, moving into later in the lifespan of the virus, is the IgM, and that is where the presentation of the IgM antibodies come into effect, and that is what that test is going to identify. And let me illustrate again, that is the late acute phase, and the individuals are still infectious. The third test, going back, that we discussed is the IgG test, and you can see from this illustration, this is the late window of the virus lifespan, and this is indicative of the convalescence and or recovery. Individuals fully expressing IgG that are negative on the PCR test or IgM have recovered from the virus and are no longer infectious. So with so many things about this virus that we don't know, the couple of things that we do know is, one, this virus is incredibly infectious. We have watched it spread all across the world in a matter of 6 months and then back again. So it's incredibly infectious. And the other thing that we don't know is how individuals will respond. Everyone is different. What we see is that the average incubation period is between 2 to 14 days. Average between 2 to 14 days, with the average of that being 5 days. We also see, once again, that everyone is different, but the antibodies are typically start being expressed, complete recovery, days to weeks after symptoms. Once again, the unknown of how each individual is going to respond. So with all this testing, you may be sitting there wondering, why in the world is this virus still spreading? Well, the answer is as clear as mud. Yesterday, according to the DHEC website, in South Carolina, the positivity rate was 10.8%. This means that for everyone that was tested through a testing facility yesterday, 10.8% of those were positive. Where it gets a little bit fuzzy is Dr. John Reddick, who is the director of the COVID surveillance of Prisma Healthcare in South Carolina. Prisma is the largest healthcare facility in South Carolina, estimates that over 25% of all individuals are asymptomatic or have a very mild case. Meaning right now, especially as things start to bloom, the fall weeds are coming, symptoms could mimic that of other things, and people don't ever get to be tested. So for all intents and purposes, and what that means for business people, like such as you, for every 100 employees, the potential to have 25 silent spreaders spreading the virus within your company is present. We can't fight what we can't see, and this is exactly why the virus is still spreading. What the latest studies have shown us is that PCR testing alone, and if I want to take you back to that, what we mentioned earlier, PCR testing is the positive or negative and is representative of the early acute phase. This testing alone is missing about 20% of the positive infections. And I want to be clear with that statement. The literature is showing that those 20% are not false negatives, but outside the testing window for that test. So once again, just to clarify, the PCR is a fabulous indicator of positive infectious rate of the virus in the early acute phase. But the limitations are that once you move past and into the late stage of infection, the PCR could be negative. Further documenting this information and supporting a complete testing subject or study matter is Dr. Wang conducted a study in 2020 that when PCR testing combined with the serology or the IgG, the detection rate jumps to 99%. The infectious COVID virus is found. Complete testing is necessary to capture all of those individuals that are still spreading the virus. Right here, I'd like to take a look and take you back to, this is another chart illustrating the waves of the virus lifespan again. And this also illustrates what you will typically see as far as the positive or negative if you slide the chart one way or the other. So PCR positive, IgM positive, IgG. Once again, the progression of the virus. And I would like to illustrate that once again, due to the immune response, individuals can have a combination of results based on the testing methodology and the overlap of the virus lifespan. So this chart right here illustrates the 3 testing methodologies that we just discussed and the possible results. So just to highlight a few things, if you look at the top line, if you have a positive PCR test, you can have a negative IgM, IgG response. That positive test would be a positive drive-through test, for example, of an active early infection. That individual is once again infectious, should quarantine and retest. Moving down the line in this chart, I'd like to really show you and illustrate why and what we're seeing with the silent spreader and illustrate line 3 here within this chart. If you will notice, individuals in this category are experiencing a negative PCR, negative drive-through test, but with further testing methodology or complete testing, the positive or the active infection is being picked up with the IgM. That individual, even though they are negative for the drive-through testing, is still infectious and still spreading the virus. Those individuals should once again not be allowed in the workplace and retesting should occur. So I'm not going to go through every steps of this chart, but each individual can experience different positives or negative based on the test that they do. Only after, and I would like to direct your eyes to the last line here, only after an individual is negative for the PCR, negative for the IgM, and positive for the IgG test results can the individual be considered non-infectious, not a threat to your corporation, and should be allowed back to work. So with that, with the information that we just discussed, complete testing is very important because complete testing is the only way that you are truly going to be able to identify the COVID infection. Identifying that COVID infection is going to allow for businesses like you to activate your best practices. And those best practices are going to optimize your uptime, which means that you are going to keep your max productivity and capacity through your companies. You're going to be getting back to what looks like normal. Identifying the COVID infection is going to allow you to minimize the risk of potential outbreaks. you are going to be able to fight because you now can see what you're facing. Identifying through complete testing, identifying is going to improve the overall health of your employees and your families. And that's got to be a priority. You have got to be sure that you are safely operating for your employees. Identifying the COVID infection is also going to allow for wellness screenings to be utilized for the company benefit. And then, of course, being able to have a documented COVID testing plan, COVID protocol to identify the infection is also going to work in your favor to reduce the liability of the workers' comp payouts through the previous steps that you have taken in order to fight the infection. Complete testing is the best way for corporations and leaders like you to address the pandemic today and get your companies back to normal. Abbott is 100% committed to partnering through this pandemic to help achieve the outcomes that we all need. We work really hard to make sure that everyone has the education that you need. You're prepared with best practices in how we can help you identify your positive individuals. We're committed to helping you once those outbreaks occur to help you find the answers, and we're committed to helping with the recovery of that. And through those partnerships, Abbott works with companies like Life and Safety to really employ the best practice. And I think what we will all agree with is the best practices sometimes begins with not letting the devil in the door. The CDC has certainly made recommendations that temperature screening is one of the indications of potential infection. And so Life and Safety has fabulous technology that takes human error and bias completely out of monitoring. Life and Safety has fabulous different methodologies to allow your employees to be safely screened to catch early indications of infections. Right here on the screen, you will see I have illustrated the thermal activity portals that Life and Safety can employ in each individual company, where the employees, as they come to work, walks through, gets their temperature scanned digitally. No extra employees needed on your part. It's done for you. All of the data is captured and categorized and helps individuals in leadership positions notify their employees of early and potential risk that infection is going to occur. Once these are identified, complete testing can be employed. Only by a monitoring program and complete testing do you have the silver bullet. With those tools, you are going to identify the threat of the COVID infection, and you can neutralize the silent spreader. Complete testing is a must, as we've described. Complete testing begins with a look and a baseline for all of your employees. It establishes the true COVID status for every employee. And that includes with a baseline of PCR, IgM, and IgG testing. This gives everyone the complete look at their COVID status. It identifies if they are in the early acute, late acute, which is infectious, all the way down to recovery. This is a must. But as you establish this baselines, as much as we would like to say, not everyone is going to be negative for all things or in that IgM recovery phase. So a complete testing methodology is going to give you the option or the Plinko board of what to do if you do have a positive. If you do identify the COVID infection within your corporation. Complete testing is going to give you a map of exactly what needs to be done to restore the health within your within your company. And then of course, the goal is that everyone is negative. But in order to continue to keep that negative status, you must continue and be vigilant to make sure that the virus stays at bay. So complete testing the full circle to have maximum protection against the threat of the COVID infection. Everyone must test regularly. You must identify the infections before they get rooted within your business. Abbott has partnered, and Abbott has been around for 132 years. For the last 50, we have spent our effort on the infectious disease realm. We were the first to develop the 5th gen HIV, and we partner across the globe to be able to bring individuals, corporations, testing fast, testing that is accurate, and the testing that you need. We want to make sure that everyone has access to the testing they need, whether you're an individual, whether you're an industry. We want to make sure that you have the testing that you need, because only when the testing that you need is available at your fingertips can we make the right directions to put a wrap on this pandemic. And through that, Abbott provides testing flexibility. There's a couple of options, of course. Testing in-house is always a possibility. However, we very much understand that not everyone needs an instrument. Not everyone has the capability of having testing in their facilities. However, everyone has the ability to be tested at an Abbott corporate lab. Here in Greenville, we have Assure Labs. They're our newest partner for corporate services. They know the challenges that corporations have and are there to meet you. Collection is done on site, and typically results are within 24 to 48 hours. Testing at your facility can be done within minutes. The testing is available to you either way, but that's the message that we want to leave today, is that we must test. And through this, you're probably asking, why Abbott? Why is Abbott pushing tests? There's lots of vendors, and you are correct. Abbott is considered world-class 6 Sigma in the infectious disease market. We have the highest number of 6 Sigma assays of any other diagnostics vendor. Stan Westgard, the Westgard rules, are known throughout the healthcare. They do not work for Abbott. They do not work for any vendor. They actually came to Abbott wanting to know what we are doing, because the performance and quality of our assays were so much higher. And that is something that Abbott hangs our hat on, because we all know if your results are not accurate, they don't mean anything. And so I'm very proud that Abbott has the 6 Sigma rating in the COVID realm. And one thing also I want to highlight that distinguishes Abbott from anyone else is that all testing is not created equal. Some tests can be affected by biotin interference. Abbott is the only vendor right now that is completely not impacted by biotin interference, which can cause false positives or negatives. Further giving you the confidence that testing on an Abbott platform is going to assure you the most accurate results. So the next step for here, now that we've discussed the testing that's available to you, the virus lifespan, how we can get you testing, is I would love to encourage a visit to each of your sites to do a customized COVID plan with you. I would like to walk you through the steps of what works best for you. I would like to help you establish best practices for your staff, for their families, and help you through this entire pandemic. Because only once we come full circle with this can we get back to normal. And getting back to normal safely, efficiently, has got to be our goal. On the screen, you'll see my contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to help however I can. And along with me, I have the whole Abbott team at your disposal. Abbott has a huge diagnostics footprint throughout the Southeast, the country, and the globe. We're all here to help you fight the pandemic. Don't hesitate to reach out. That concludes my presentation. At this time, I'd like to open it up for questions. Please feel free to let me know how I can help.
All right, Heather, thank you very much. This is Nathan again. That was some great information. I do have a couple questions that were sent in outside the chat window. Again, to everyone who's on here, feel free to post any questions to the chat screen and I will ask those of Heather. So I'll start with a couple that I have. I think you already answered one of them. Where is this being done? You mentioned your partner, and where exactly is their location?
Where can you get tested for COVID-19? Abbott is in all of the major hospitals within South Carolina and throughout. The hospital systems here, Prisma, DHEC, MUSC, all of Abbott can be found in that. However, as you will see, there's lots of drive-throughs throughout that are typically posted on the news. All of that can be done, but only through a lab can you do the complete testing. And once again, through the literature, through the presentation, complete testing is going to be the means of identifying the COVID infection. So we would recommend that you either visit one of our hospital labs or our corporate lab to be sure you get that complete testing, because only through that are you going to be able to completely identify that infection.
Okay, great. So, kind of a follow-up question. As an individual, just so for myself, if I'm curious, I want to go and I'd like to have all three, well, not the swab because that's not fun. I've had that one time before myself. If I wanted to have the other two tests to find out, am I late stage but not showing symptoms, or am I developing antibodies, meaning I have had it before? Is there somewhere as an individual that I can go and maybe self-pay or work with my insurance to get those tests done?
Absolutely, absolutely. Assure Labs is here in Greenville, right off Woodruff Road. Their hours are 8 to 6 every day. They do collections there.
Okay.
There's a cash pay and or insurance option there, and they can run all three, and they are a complete reference lab. So while you're there, you can get any other diagnostics done that you need. But certainly they are open to individuals and have the capability of doing all three tests.
Okay, great. At the end of this presentation, Heather, you and I can talk offline and I'll get some contact information from Assure, and I'll put an email out to everybody who joined us today and include that in there. I think that would be some valuable information. Let me look. I think I've got a couple more questions. Can you mention, I know you maybe not be able to, but can you mention any businesses that have partnered with you or who are currently using this process for their
Absolutely. Some of the biggest studies, and I will be happy to provide these to you, are coming in the forms of diagnostics testings for MUSC, for the University of South Carolina football team, for example.
Okay.
Clemson, for Furman. For all of these are partnering with Abbott through labs in the area in order to make sure that their complete testing is done. Some of the other industries here are, certainly, various different types. There's banks involved, and there's also, we are really helping out with our friends in blue. We are working with our first responders here. We're working with fire departments. We're working with the police department, also to make sure that complete testing is done. So testing is available to anyone, and it's certainly being utilized as ways to get people back to work, back to normal, back on the field. It's a way that we are establishing a baseline of health. And when we start talking about Clemson football, for example, we all want to be on the stage or in the stands. So being able to get the testing to everyone and partner with who all needs it, that is our commitment.
Fantastic. All right, so I have one that came through the chat window. the question was, what if your company is not open to checking temperatures and being proactive? So it sounds like as an employee or someone working for a company, what can I do if my company is not necessarily invested in this? What
Ab-
options?
Absolutely. And that is one thing that I want to make sure that I touch on again is this virus, it affects everyone. It doesn't just affect, you know, the young, the old. It does not discriminate. And so I would highly recommend, even if companies are not necessarily progressive in testing, that the individuals take that upon themselves to be tested for their own family. We all are mothers, grandmothers, sisters. We all are responsible for doing our part to stop the spread. And only knowing your testing status and your COVID status is going to do that. And so by all means, I will be happy to get the individual to testing locations.
Excellent. That's fantastic. I think with the Assure Lab information that we've talked about already, we will be able to provide that to anybody who's interested. Again, I will put that into an email that goes out after this presentation. That concludes the question and answer portion. I don't have any other questions that have been presented. Heather, thank you so much for your presentation today. That was fantastic. A lot of great information on the 3 different types of tests that are out there. I know it's helped me understand a lot more about what each one of those means, what their effectiveness is, and what the combination of those 3 tests could mean for me or the employees, the companies that we as life and safety consultants work with. I did want everyone to know we do have 2 more webinars coming up this year. I know it's crazy. It's already September, October, November, December. We're done with the year. So we have in October a webinar on contractor policy, onboarding, and training. That'll be on October 14th. We'll send out information on that. And then in November, we're going to shift focus a little bit and go more toward the positive stuff. We're going to do a webinar on driving positive behavior, talking about things like incentive programs, developing a culture of safety, all that kind of good stuff that we want to foster within our businesses. So again, those will be our webinars that come up in October and November, and I think we're going to take a break in December on the webinar schedule. Once again, this presentation has been recorded. It will be put on our YouTube channel later this week. So be looking out for an email or just go to our YouTube channel and you can see some of our past presentations as well. Again, Heather, thank you very much for your time and for presenting this to all of us today. It's really appreciated. And thank you for everyone who joined us as well. Everyone have a great day. Stay safe and be healthy out there.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.